France is, without a doubt, the greatest football talent factory on the entire planet. Honestly, it's not even up for debate. But underneath all that glittering surface of world-class academies and international trophies, there's this dark, sprawling economic mystery. Today, we're taking a close look at a system that is in profound crisis. We're going to examine the shocking financial collapse of one of the world's most prestigious sporting institutions. Because look, this isn't just a story about sports. It's a deep dive into broken business models, vanished the billions, and structural failures that literally threaten to tear an entire league apart.
There is a massive, glaring contradiction right at the heart of French football. On one hand, just think about the names for a second. Kylian Mbappé, William Saliba, Eduardo Camavinga, Aurélien Tchouaméni. Every single year, like clockwork, France produces a brand new generation of absolute world-class players. They're the envy of the globe. But then, you look at the other side of the ledger. Despite all of that unparalleled talent, French club football is facing a historic financial crisis. We were talking about clubs collectively losing more than €1 billion every single year. Century-old historic institutions are teetering on the absolute brink of financial ruin, and the entire league is just suffocating under this enormous economic pressure.
Which brings us to the ultimate question, right? How can a country that produces so many elite, globally recognized footballers actually struggle to keep its own clubs alive? It completely defies basic economic logic. I mean, you have the absolute best product, the most sought-after raw materials on the global market, yet the factories themselves are going bankrupt. To really understand this economic detective story, we actually have to rewind to a moment when everything seemed perfectly fine right before the bubble completely burst.
For years, Ligue 1, which is the top tier of French football, built its entire financial future around one singular, very risky belief: that television rights would just keep growing forever. And in 2018, that dream actually appeared to come true. A Spanish broadcaster named MediaPro agreed to pay more than €1 billion per season for the league's broadcasting rights. $1 billion. It was the golden ticket. It was supposed to finally put French football on the exact same financial level as the heavyweights in Spain, Germany, and Italy. But then, the whole thing fell apart. Before the deal had even fully begun, MediaPro just stopped making payments. The company completely collapsed. In a single, devastating moment, Ligue 1 lost hundreds of millions of euros in expected, already budgeted revenue. Amazon stepped in temporarily, but for a fraction of the price. Later on, DAZN took over, and that partnership? Yeah, that also ended in deep disappointment. Within a remarkably short window of time, French football saw its absolute lifeblood, its television income, slashed by more than half.
And here is the brutal reality of that collapse. According to France's financial watchdog, professional clubs recorded roughly €1.4 billion in losses. 1.4 billion. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth was the damage so incredibly high? Well, because the lost TV deal wasn't the only problem. The fatal error was that French clubs had already adjusted their spending to match revenues that didn't actually exist yet. They bought into the illusion completely. They aggressively increased player wages. They signed vastly more expensive players. They took on massive financial risks, banking entirely on that promised MediaPro money. So when the television money vanished into thin air, those skyrocketing costs, they stayed exactly where they were. In professional football, you can't just fire players when your revenue drops. Those long-term contracts are ironclad, multi-million-euro obligations that clubs are legally bound to pay, regardless of what's happening to their income.
So what do you do when you're suddenly missing hundreds of millions of euros? You panic. Pure, unadulterated financial panic. The clubs frantically began selling off their primary assets, their players, just to plug the massive holes in their sinking ships. They generated hundreds of millions of euros through these emergency player sales. But here is the kicker. Even after a massive fire sale of their top talent, the league still posted a deficit exceeding 500 million euros, over €500 million in the red, even after stripping their rosters completely bare. This exposed a dangerously fragile financial foundation. Entire business models were built on unverified, phantom money, and reality had finally come to collect the bill.
This creates a terrifying downward spiral. It's essentially a vicious transfer cycle. Step 1. Because of that massive structural deficit, clubs have to rely on transfer fees simply to balance the books and avoid bankruptcy. Step 2. To get those exceptionally high fees, they're forced to sell their absolute biggest stars to wealthier foreign leagues. Step 3. Without those stars, the domestic French competition naturally becomes far less attractive to fans in the stadium, to global sponsors, and critically, to future broadcasters. Which leads directly to Step 4. Revenue drops even further, creating an even larger deficit for the following season. It is wildly ironic Having the world's best youth development system is the exact thing draining the league of its star power and its commercial value.
The absolutely crucial point here is the underlying motivation behind these sales, because it reveals a massive structural flaw. In England, when clubs sell players, they're generally doing it to make profits, right? They're strategically reinvesting that capital, they're upgrading their squads, and they're executing calculated business growth. But over in France, clubs are selling players just to survive. It's a desperate act of preservation, not progression. When a business is forced to liquidate its absolute best inventory just to keep the lights on and pay the electric bill, it isn't really competing anymore. It is just treading water until it inevitably drowns.
Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. Wait a minute. What about Paris Saint-Germain? Aren't they one of the richest, most prominent clubs in the world? Yes, absolutely. And that brings us to what we can call the PSG anomaly. Paris Saint-Germain is an absolute global juggernaut. They sell millions of shirts, they secure massive international sponsorship deals, and they attract this worldwide, ultra-dedicated audience. But they are essentially operating on an island. Almost all of French football's global commercial attention is hyper-focused on this single club, and the rest of the league benefits very, very little from it. Compare that to England's Premier League. You've got Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City. Multiple massive clubs, each with enormous, deeply entrenched global fan bases. England has multi-club dominance. France basically has one. And having only one true global powerhouse makes it incredibly difficult to elevate the commercial value of the entire league when it comes time to negotiate those global broadcasting rights.
Beyond that severe lack of global brands, there's a fundamental infrastructure problem at play here too. English and German clubs generate staggering amounts of money from their physical assets. We are talking about club-owned, modern stadiums that generate cash 365 days a year, massive concerts, high-end restaurants, elite VIP hospitality, club museums, and daily stadium tours. Now contrast that with France. Historically, many stadiums in France are actually owned by local municipalities, not the football clubs themselves. Because the clubs are essentially just renting the property, they completely miss out on millions upon millions of euros in this essential non-football income. Their commercial partnerships and merchandising capabilities are significantly smaller as a result, and because they lack these diverse, reliable revenue streams, they become dangerously, almost fatally, dependent on that volatile television money.
The result of that dependency is a financial gap that is just staggering. To put it into perspective, every single year, the Premier League pulls in almost 4 billion euros from domestic and international broadcasting rights. Ligue 1, they receive roughly 400 million euros. It is almost 10 times less. 10 times! And it's not just England leaving them in the dust. Germany, Spain, and Italy also far outpace France in raw commercial revenue. Those rival leagues spent decades meticulously building global products, modernizing their infrastructure, and investing heavily in club-owned stadiums. France, on the other hand, invested primarily in developing players, not in developing the league as a resilient, self-sustaining global business.
Look, this isn't just abstract math on a spreadsheet anymore. The real-world reckoning for decades of structural mismanagement is hitting the league right now. We are talking about severe, existential consequences for beloved institutions with deep cultural roots. Historic teams are receiving heavy financial sanctions from regulatory bodies. Many have been placed under strict transfer restrictions or punishing limits on player registrations. Some have even faced the ultimate nightmare of administrative relegation purely because they are financially insolvent. Take Olympique Lyon as a prime example. This is one of France's most historically successful, dominant clubs, a true titan of the sport, and even they are currently facing severe financial sanctions. When an institution with the prestige and history of Lyon is squarely in the crosshairs of financial ruin, it shows you exactly how deep and pervasive this crisis truly is.
So, how do you actually fix this? How does an entire league pull itself out of a billion-euro crater? Well, French football is desperately trying to engineer a recovery right now, and they're proposing 4 main measures. First, implementing much stricter internal financial regulations to prevent that reckless spending we saw during the media pro illusion. Second, enforcing a painful but absolutely necessary reduction of club wage bills across the board. Third, attempting to leverage new, modern streaming services to capture a younger demographic. And fourth, they're exploring the launch of a dedicated Ligue 1 television channel to take total control of their own broadcasting destiny. But we need to be really honest here. That final point, launching a direct-to-consumer platform requires immense capital up front, and it basically turns the league itself into a broadcaster. It's a massive financial gamble. Ultimately, these measures are largely just band-aids applied to a gaping structural wound. They are necessary steps for sure, but they don't fix the core issue.
Because when you strip it all back, it really boils down to one undeniable reality.
French football doesn't just have a television problem, it has a business model problem. As long as clubs are inherently designed to rely on unpredictable broadcasting deals and the forced, desperate sale of their best young talent just to stay afloat, there is going to be no stability. None. Every single economic bump in the road, whether it's a lost corporate sponsor, a fluctuating TV market, or a slight global downturn, is going to trigger another catastrophic crisis. France desperately needs what England spent the last 3 decades methodically building, a robust, diversified league that is absolutely not dependent on a single fragile source of income.
France is undoubtedly going to continue to produce world-class talent. The local academies are simply too good. The nation's footballing culture is just far too rich. But unless the financial foundations fundamentally change, those bright young stars are just going to keep leaving their homeland earlier and earlier. And without the stars actually gracing the pitch on the weekend, the league loses the very magic that draws people in to begin with. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Perhaps French football's greatest challenge isn't producing the next Kylian Mbappé, but finding a way to actually keep him. I really want to hear from you on this one. Can this league ever truly restructure and compete financially with the Premier League, La Liga, or the Bundesliga again? Or are they forever destined to be Europe's most talented stepping stone? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you found this explainer valuable, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the complex mechanics of our world. Thank you so much for being a focused learner with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.